Have you ever wondered how a spice from Asia ended up in your kitchen? Or how a story from the Middle East became a famous tale in Europe? The answer is trade. For thousands of years, people have crossed deserts, mountains, and oceans to exchange goods and ideas. This giant network of connections is what we call global trade. It is like a huge, invisible web that links different parts of our world together. This web did not just appear recently. It was woven over centuries by brave sailors, determined merchants, and powerful kingdoms. Long before the internet or airplanes, these ancient pathways of commerce shaped our history in incredible ways. Africa was not just a part of this story, it was at the very center of it. For a very long time, many history books focused only on Europe or Asia. They often forgot to mention the powerful and wealthy African empires that were key players in this global exchange before the collapse caused by the disruption of colonialism. The Jonathan Green Maritime Cultural Center at the University of South Carolina, Beaufort, is the first museum in the world that will focus exclusively on the stories of art, history, and culture created by the movement of humans by water. From the scorching sands of the Sahara Desert to the bustling port cities along the eastern coast, Africa was a continent of vibrant marketplaces. These were not just places to buy and sell things. They were also places where different cultures met, shared knowledge, and created new traditions. Africa's role was essential to building the world economy we know today. How much of this history has not been shared widely, and the Jonathan Green Maritime Cultural Center will change those dynamics. Imagine a world where continents were isolated, each one a separate island of existence. It would be a very different place. Trade broke down these walls. It allowed people to discover new foods, new technologies, and new ways of thinking. When a merchant from Africa met a trader from India, they did more than just swap gold for spices. They exchanged stories, music, and art. They learned about each other's religions and customs. This sharing of culture is one of the most important results of trade. It enriched societies everywhere, making the world a more diverse and interesting place. The Jonathan Green Maritime Cultural Center, through its Richard Weedman Research Center, will research and share many unknown and little-known stories of African and African diasporic contributions to American and world maritime history. So when we talk about the history of world trade, we must start in Africa. The continent's vast resources and its strategic location made it a natural crossroads for the ancient world. Great caravans of camels numbering in the thousands trekked across the Sahara. Mighty ships with billowing sails navigated the Indian Ocean. These journeys were long and often dangerous, but the rewards were immense. They connected powerful African kingdoms with distant lands, creating a flow of wealth and culture that would change the course of history and lay the groundwork for our modern, interconnected planet. Let's travel back in time to an African marketplace. Picture a city like Timbuktu in the Great Mali Empire. The air is filled with the sounds of different languages and the smells of exotic spices and perfumes. Merchants are gathered under colorful awnings, their tables piled high with goods. You would see shimmering gold dust, heavy blocks of salt, and beautiful textiles woven with intricate patterns. These marketplaces were the engines of the African economy. They were sophisticated centers of commerce where goods from deep within the continent were gathered and prepared for their long journey to other parts of the world. They were organized, regulated, and vital to the empire's power. These were not simple, small-town markets. They were massive, internationally famous hubs. Think of them as the ancient world's equivalent of New York or London. In West Africa, cities like Gao and Jenne became incredibly wealthy because they controlled the trade routes across the Sahara Desert. The most valuable goods were gold, which was plentiful in West Africa, and salt, which was mined in the desert. Salt was so valuable it was sometimes traded for its weight in gold. These cities became legendary for their wealth, attracting scholars, architects, and traders from all over the Islamic world and beyond. The influence of these marketplaces extended far beyond just buying and selling. They were also incredible centers of learning and culture. In Timbuktu, for example, great universities and libraries were built, filled with manuscripts on mathematics, astronomy, law, and literature. Scholars from across Africa and the Middle East traveled there to study and debate. This intellectual exchange was just as important as the trade in gold and salt. Ideas traveled along the same routes as the goods, spreading knowledge and new perspectives across vast distances. The wealth from trade directly funded this explosion of art and scholarship. This system shows how organized and powerful African societies were. Controlling these trade networks required strong governments, complex legal systems, and a deep understanding of economics. The rulers of empires like Mali and Songhai became some of the richest and most powerful people in the world. Mansa Musa, an emperor of Mali, was so wealthy that his journey to Mecca in the 14th century famously disrupted the economy of Egypt because he gave away so much gold. This story illustrates the immense scale of African commerce and its profound impact on the rest of the world. Now let's leave the desert sands and travel to the eastern coast of Africa, to a region known as the Swahili Coast. Here, a different kind of trade network flourished, one that crossed the vast Indian Ocean. For centuries, a chain of bustling port cities like Kilwa, Mombasa, and Zanzibar dotted the coastline. These cities were perfectly positioned to catch the monsoon winds, which sailors used to travel back and forth between Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, India, and even as far as China. This maritime trade was just as important as the camel caravans of the Sahara, connecting Africa to the east. The sailors of the Swahili coast were masters of the sea. They built sturdy ships called dhows, with distinctive triangular sails designed to capture the seasonal winds. From November to March, the winds blew from the northeast, carrying ships from Arabia and India to Africa. Then, from April to September, the winds reversed, blowing from the southwest, allowing the ships to make the return journey home, their hulls filled with African goods. This predictable wind pattern created a reliable rhythm of trade that lasted for over 1,000 years, building immense wealth and fostering deep cultural connections across the entire Indian Ocean basin. What did these ships carry? From Africa, they brought precious materials that were in high demand across Asia. These included gold, ivory from elephants, and valuable animal skins. They also exported timber, particularly mangrove poles, which were essential for building houses in the Arabian Gulf. In return, ships arriving in Africa brought goods from distant lands. From China came beautiful porcelain and silk. From India came colorful cotton textiles and spices like pepper and cardamom. From the Middle East came perfumes, glassware, and books. The Swahili cities became a melting pot of goods from all over the known world. This constant exchange created a unique and vibrant new culture, the Swahili culture. The word Swahili itself comes from an Arabic word meaning of the coast. A new language, Kiswahili, emerged, blending the local Bantu languages of Africa with many words from Arabic. The architecture also reflected this mix. Mosques and palaces were built using African coral stone, but were designed with arches and courtyards inspired by styles from Persia and Arabia. This fusion of African and Asian influences created a sophisticated cosmopolitan civilization that was truly unique in the world, all born from the connections of maritime trade. The legacy of Africa's early trade networks is all around us, even if we don't always see it. The exchange was not just about gold and spices, it was about the movement of art, music, architecture, and people. African artistic styles, for example, traveled far and wide. The intricate geometric patterns found in West African textiles influenced designs in North Africa and the Middle East. The skilled craftsmanship of African artisans in carving ivory and wood was admired and sought after in Europe and Asia for centuries. This was a two-way street, as African artists also adopted new techniques and materials they encountered through trade. However, we must also face a difficult truth about these trade networks. Alongside the beautiful goods and brilliant ideas, they also carried a tragic human cargo. The enslavement of people was a part of these ancient and medieval trade routes. Many African people who had already been enslaved in Africa were sold again in marketplaces to be transported across both the Sahara Desert and the Indian Ocean for enslavement in the Middle East, India, and elsewhere. This first great movement of enslaved Africans occurred within the Indian Ocean or Swahili trade network. This is a dark and painful part of this history. It reminds us that global connection has not always been positive for everyone. It shows that the history of commerce is complex, filled with both great achievement and terrible injustice. Despite this difficult history, Africa's positive influence on the world is undeniable and enduring. This monumental history should never be forgotten, and the Jonathan Green Maritime Cultural Center at the University of South Carolina Beaufort will serve as an international beacon for safeguarding this history. The wealth generated from trade, built magnificent cities, and funded centers of learning that were beacons of knowledge in their time. The connections forged by African merchants helped create the first truly global economy, linking continents in a web of exchange that laid the foundation for our modern world. African kingdoms were not passive participants. They were powerful agents who shaped the direction of world history through their economic strength and cultural innovation. Their legacy is one of resilience, creativity, and power. Thinking about this long history helps us understand the world today. It challenges the old idea that important history only happened in Europe. Africa was, and continues to be, a vital center of global culture and commerce. By studying these ancient trade routes, we can appreciate the deep historical roots of our interconnected world. We see how different cultures can enrich one another, but we also learn to think critically about the inequalities that can arise from these connections. Africa's story is a central part of our shared human story. The Jonathan Green Maritime Cultural Center at the University of South Carolina, Beaufort, serves as the international hub of research, learning, and dissemination for this valuable aspect of human cultural history.